Hello, Big Tube. Hello, friends. Welcome to Lizziefaye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth. And in this video, I'd like to share with you part of what I read in the month of October. So I decided I would divide my wrap up into two parts for October because I did film it already on Sunday afternoon, and it turned out to be like 53 minutes of raw footage, which takes forever to edit. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to come back and refilm this and divide it in two parts. The other reason I wanted to refilm it is because, Sunday was the time change, and I had filmed my November TBR first. And then by the time I got started filming my wrap up, it was time to start the live stream on Tiffany's channel. And so I kept coming back and trying to film segments of it while we were on sprints, but it was just getting so dark by that point that I just didn't feel happy with the video. So I think this is going to work out a lot better. And what I'm going to focus on in this video is what I read for the Journey Through the Bible Readathon hosted by Katie from Paperbacks and Ponytails. Now, most of it is going to be Christian fiction, but not everything. And I will share with you what I read for each prompt, but then the ones that are not Christian fiction, I will probably just kind of, gloss over, and then I will include those again in my wrap up, which will be everything that's not Christian fiction or that I didn't read for the readathon in the second part. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you're not familiar with the Journey Through the Bible Readathon, I think this is Katie's fourth year hosting this, and this was my first year really just getting a chance to jump in head first and try to accomplish as much of it as I could. I have known about it and I have dabbled in it, but I've never really just fully done the whole thing. So this is what my printout looks like this year. So I did accomplish all of the first three categories except one. And then you are only supposed to do one of each of the last two categories. So I really did all that I could do except one, and that was under the category of what are you hunting for? The Temple of Jerusalem, and the actual prompt was to read a special edition book. And I just don't really have much in the way of special edition books. I don't even know if I have any, really. I haven't really gotten pulled into the need to have special edition books. I'm sure if some of my all-time favorites ever came out with super special editions that I might give in to that temptation, but as of right now, I'm good with what I have. So I didn't do that one, but I did manage to do all of the others in the first three categories. So just to familiarize you with it, the first category is where are you going? And so there are four places that you could go, in the Bible, and they are Jericho, the Jordan River, and Canaan, which is the Promised Land, and then the Red Sea. So for Jericho, you are to read the biggest book on your TBR. For the Jordan River, you are to read a book that crosses two genres. For Canaan, you are to read a book that you promised to read last year. And for the Red Sea, a book that lays flat. So then the second category is what are you hunting for? You have Pharaoh's Tomb, which is to read a book with royalty. Rod of Moses, which is to read a physical book. The Temple of Jerusalem, which is special edition. That's what I didn't do. The Ark of the Covenant, which is to read a book of your favorite genre. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, to read a book of the Bible. And King Solomon's Treasure, to read a book of poetry. And then Precious Rubies is red on the cover. So those are what are you hunting for. And then who are you going to meet? You could meet a librarian, and you are to read a library book recommendation. You could meet a pilot, and you are to read a book with a mode of transportation on the cover. You could meet a treasure hunter, and you are to read a book with foil on the cover. And then you could meet a tomb raider, which is to steal a book from someone's TBR. Don't steal a book, but steal a book from someone's TBR, like read the same book that someone else is reading. And then here's where it gets tricky. So The next category is who do you encounter? And that's the booby trap category. So you're only supposed to pick one booby trap. And I picked Water Pit, which is to read a book with water on the cover. Now the others are, to me, a little harder to do. So the reason I picked Water Pit was because I had a couple of books with water on the cover. The others were Trapdoor, which is to read a book a friend chooses, and I didn't have time for that. I had to just read what I needed to read. Then Rolling Boulder, which is to read a new release that you meant to read last year, or meant to read earlier, I think. So I did have a couple of new releases, but they had just come out. So I don't think I read any new releases that I meant to read earlier. Then Net Trap, which was to read a book with a plot twist. Well, that's hard to know until you read the book. So for me, the Water Pit was easier, but I'm afraid that when I watched Katie's video last night to see what the way of escape was, I picked the wrong way of escape. So you had to choose one way to escape and hope that it was the way out of whichever booby trap you picked. So the way of escape I chose was Trapdoor, which was to read a book with a door on the cover. Again, I could have probably chosen one of the others. They were not that hard, but I just had to, close my eyes and pick one. And the one with water on the cover was easy enough. I think that she said the one that was the way of escape for the Water Pit was clothing, because you could, I think there's like a thing where you can take your pants off and make a floating device out of them, like by tying them together or something. So that's kind of cool. I didn't know that. But you had to pick in advance and say what you were going to pick. You can't change it once you find out. So I'm stuck in the Water Pit, and y'all, I do have a fear of drowning. I'm not a good swimmer, but it's okay. It's all just in fun. The other one was a knife, or to read a mystery, and then now the clothing one was to read one with a person on the cover. So, of course, any book that I'm going to read with a person on the cover is going to be wearing clothing. So, then the other one was Rope Ladder, and that was to read a book that's the highest rated on your TBR, which actually I could have probably managed that as well, but I picked Trapdoor. So it's all good. Anyway, let me share with you then what I read for each of these. Now, I started out saying I was just going to go straight across, but I knew I was going to have to skip the first one, biggest book on your TBR, because I was thinking that I would read the biggest book on my whole TBR, which was sitting in my currently reading cart, but I couldn't get to that. And then I got to thinking, I was focusing on my collection of 25 books that I set out to read for my 25 and 25 challenge. And I could just read the biggest book that's in my 25 by 25 group. And I did. So I ended up that I did do that one, but not until later on in the month. So then I kind of accidentally skipped over the second one, which was to read a book crossing two genres. And I started with the one that I promised to read last year. Well, I promised to read all of these 25 by 25 books last year. So I just picked one that I wasn't using for any of the other challenges, and I absolutely loved it. This is called Simple Gifts by Lori Copeland. This was so unique. This is about a woman who was born to two special needs parents who met and fell in love in an institution, and in their mind, they got married, although nobody else, seemed to realize that. They just thought that this woman who could not really do anything for herself got pregnant by this man who was in this institution. And, she had the baby, but couldn't care for it. So the grandmother, I believe it was the mother of the father, ended up taking care of and raising the baby, which turns out to be our main character. And the woman's father did not end up staying in the institution. Maybe he had been injured or something, but he was a person in the town who was able to function. He actually did a lot for animals. He did a lot for this animal shelter. And so part of the conflict in the book is that the people at the animal shelter want to erect a statue to him. But there are some, older traditional people who just think that that would be shameful to erect a statue of a man, besides the fact that he was, what they would call simple, that he got this girl pregnant in a nursing home, and everything. So it's known around the town that, of course, this woman is his daughter, and she's kind of known as, I forget now what his name is, but she was raised by her grandmother and everything, and she always knew that she was his daughter, and she had a relationship with him, but because he was developmentally challenged, she was always kind of embarrassed by him, about him and everything. And it is just such a good book, y'all. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So if you ever get a chance to read it, I highly recommend it. I rated it 5 stars. I just thought it was wonderful. So then I went back and I did read a book that crossed 2 genres. I read a book by Terry Blackstock called Cape Refuge. This is the first book in the Cape Refuge series. And I picked this one because it is Christian fiction and it is a mystery thriller. So, or a suspense thriller or whatever. And again, Terry Blackstock does not disappoint. She is just so good at writing suspenseful books. And I am really looking forward to reading more in this series. I don't own any more in this series, or I probably would have continued on, but I made myself stop after this one so that I could go on and focus on the Readathon and my other books that I actually own, because the whole goal of my 25 by 25 challenge is to listen to as many of these as I can on audio so that I can unhaul them. A lot of them I will donate to our church library, and several of them I'm sure I will trade in at our bookstore where I work. So this, though, was excellent. I highly recommend anything by Terry Blackstock. I've read several now, and I'm excited to read more. I guess I should tell you about this one. This is about a little community on an island called Cape Refuge, and there are a couple of people there who run kind of a halfway house for people who have just kind of been rejected by society. They have done something wrong or done something in their past that just makes it hard for them to move forward with their lives. And so these people take them in with the understanding that they will come to church, they will, do something that is beneficial to society, they will work. But at the beginning of the book, this couple is brutally murdered. And of course, one of the residents of their home is accused, but the daughters of those 2 people who were murdered don't believe that it was this man. One of the daughters has wholeheartedly embraced a life of faith, and the other daughter just feels like it was kind of forced on her, and she doesn't want to, believe that anything good can come from this or anything like that. So there's just a lot of good stuff that you can sink your teeth into in this book. Then there's another young girl who is running from someone, and she is just using what money she has to get as far away from this, I think, abusive boyfriend as she can. And she gets to a little diner that's, I think, on the coast, and the waitress there tells her about Cape Refuge. But by the time she gets there, she discovers that these people who ran this house had been murdered. So she doesn't really know what to do at this point. So it's her story as well. Anyway, very, very good. Highly recommend it. So from there, the next prompt was to read a book that opens in the middle, and I didn't think I had anything for that, so I skipped it. Then I realized at the end of the month that I did have something for it, so I'll go ahead and show it to you now. It is the main book that I read with Emily this month. It is a 3-in-1 book by Catherine Hapka, the Pet Rescue Club, or ASPCA Kids Pet Rescue Club. And we read all 3 stories. Each story had 10 chapters. So it was perfect. We never missed a day all month. And so it took us 30 days to read all 30 chapters. The first one was about a dog. And the cool thing is that each of the stories is based on a real animal that actually existed. The first one was A New Home for Truman, and it's about a little dog. And then the second one was No Time for Hallie, and it's about a cat. And then the third one was about a pony called The Lonely Pony. So we enjoyed all of these, and I looked them up on Goodreads and found that it is a larger series, and it looks like one of the libraries in our county has more of them. So it is very possible that we will continue on with the series. But right now, we're trying to get through a whole stack of books that are lined up on one of her shelves. So for November, we have continued on with that. But we did read then on the last day of the month, we read the 2025 Caldecott winner, which I will show you in my part 2 video. Oh, but as you can see, this book does lay open. It lays flat. The idea was that, when Moses parted the Red Sea, or God parted the Red Sea through Moses, then the Israelites walked right up the middle. So I thought that was a very clever prompt. The next category was, what are you hunting for? And I did all of those but one. There were a total of 7, so I did 6 of them. The first one was Pharaoh's Tomb. You were to read a book with royalty. Now, I read The Centurion's Wife by Davis Bunn and Jeanette Oak. This was excellent. This is biblical fiction. Now, a centurion is not royalty, but there were other Roman royalty mentioned in the book, and so it can definitely count for that prompt. So this is biblical fiction set around the time that Jesus was crucified, and I just thought it was very, very good. It's not the only biblical fiction that I read this month, but I think this one is my favorite. Okay, the next one was Rod of Moses, which is to read a physical book. I actually read 14 physical books in the month of October. In fact, I kind of forgot to give you my stats, so I will do that in part 2. But most of the physical books I read were not Christian fiction, and so I decided early on I was going to choose Barefoot Beach by Debbie Mason for this prompt. This is not a Christian fiction book at all. In fact, they can get a little steamy, not super steamy, but kind of middle of the road, I guess. Anyway, this was probably my favorite in the series so far. We just have one left. I've been buddy reading this Harmony Harbor series with Fiona from the channel My Cosy Haven. And if you have not subscribed to her or checked out her videos, I hope that you will. And we have really been enjoying it. Some books have definitely been better than others, but I think we're both going to be excited to finish it up in December and check that series off of our SAS lists and move on. But for now, this is what we read in October, and so I am counting it for my challenge to read a physical book. The next prompt was Ark of the Covenant, to read a book in your favorite genre. That is hard for me. It's not hard for me to tell you what my favorite book is, but it's hard for me to tell you my favorite genre because I just enjoy so many different genres. And I figured, though, since I'm focusing on Christian fiction, I would just say Christian fiction. That will be my favorite genre for this month. And it is absolutely one of my favorite genres. And it turned out that I absolutely loved the book that I picked for this prompt. I read Leota's Garden by Francine Rivers. This was kind of raw. It definitely had some topics that you wouldn't expect to find in a Christian fiction book, but I thought it was excellent. It was about a family that is so off the charts dysfunctional that they really have a long way back to each other. There's also a young man who is not a Christian. He's in college and he's in a relationship that's not healthy, and for a project or something that he needs to do for one of his classes, he needs to interview an elderly person so that he can do this project. So that's how he meets Leota, and Leota is the grandmother of this family that I said is very dysfunctional. So it all comes together, works together and everything. And I just thought it was very well done. Francine Rivers is not afraid of hard topics. She definitely includes some things in her book that are not sugar-coated. So if you think that sounds good to you, then you might want to give it a try. But just know there are some topics that you are probably not going to like in this book. The next one was the prompt Dead Sea Scrolls, and you were to read a book of the Bible. And I read the book of Ephesians, which is one of the shorter books. It has 6 chapters, but I chose the book of Ephesians not only because it was short, but because I've been reading the Through the Bible study by Les Feldick. And in the most recent book that I read, he was citing quite a few scriptures in Ephesians. So it just made sense to pick up the book of Ephesians and read it from beginning to end. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Of course, I've read Ephesians before. I've read the whole Bible a few times now, but it just seemed to really go hand in hand with the Bible study that I was reading. So the next one was King Solomon's Treasury, and you were to read a book of poetry. So I ended up rereading a book that my mother had given me when I first moved to Florida. I don't think I ever read it at the time she gave it to me, but I read it a few years ago. She had even inscribed it, and, it was kind of a send-off from me, leaving Oklahoma, setting off for Florida. It's dated August 1st, 1988, and I had forgotten when I read this the first time that the book itself was disappointing. And it's really not poetry. I mean, I think it can count for this. It looks like poetry, but it's just kind of inspirational writings. The problem with it is that it really just obviously leaves God out of the inspiration that it's trying to give you. That makes me wonder if my mom even read it, because she may have kind of skimmed it and thought, oh, okay, I'm on my way to a brighter day. That seems like a good sentiment for a send-off, but it very conspicuously leaves God out of the equation. And I don't think my mom had that intention at all. My mother was a very strong Christian and always taught me the value of giving God everything, and without God we can do nothing. So I read this again, and I didn't get very far into it when I remembered, oh yeah, this is that book that leaves God out. There is one time where God is mentioned, but it's not even capitalized, so that's kind of offensive. Anyway, that aside, I really appreciated that my mom thought enough to give me a book and write in it and, send me off with something that she thought would be good for me. And I would like to pass this on to my daughter, but I absolutely don't want to leave God out of the equation. So I'm thinking that I will maybe write something here that I can address to Katie and maybe give it to her when she gets out of vet school or something. But definitely mention that, I would never want her to leave God out of her future. So anyway, this is one of those Blue Mountain Arts books, I think it's called. Blue Mountain Press books. These used to be real popular back in like the 80s, maybe 70s. I don't know. I have seen a few others around. In fact, I've got a couple of others that I have been given in some free stuff that I may or may not read. But anyway, I did read this one for the prompt poetry. So then the last one in the category of what are you hunting for is rubies. And you were to read a book with red on the cover. Well, I had a book with a totally red cover. So this is what I read. I listened to it on audio, of course. This is The Robe by Lloyd C. Douglas. This is also biblical fiction about the time of Jesus's crucifixion. It is probably considered a classic biblical fiction book. And the main character is a Roman soldier who was tasked with actually crucifying Jesus. And when the soldiers cast lots to see who would get Jesus's robe, he was the one who got the robe. And then later on, he's, disturbed by the whole event, and someone talks him into trying the robe on, and he just has this strange supernatural experience that he can't explain, and it kind of sends him off on this strange mental experience. And so then he decides to go and search out people who knew Jesus and the people who still worship him, and just try to understand what happened. So it's very good, but it is very long, and I got bogged down in it. I did not love it nearly as much as The Centurion's Wife. This one was, I thought, just great. This one just took so long to read, and I thought it could have been shorter. It was very good, but I just kind of got tired of it before I got done with it. So I've heard other people talk about it, and they really loved it, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to you. Just know that it's a book you can't really rush through. It will take some time. So then the third category is, who are you going to meet? And the first one was a librarian. And the prompt was to read a book that your library recommended. It could be a library display or something specifically that your librarian or a library staff member recommended. So the one I chose for that was actually the book that we read for my mystery book club in October. It's A Death in Cornwall by Daniel Silva. So this is obviously not Christian fiction either, but our library staff member who leads our regular book club, she also comes to our mystery club and is, very instrumental in all the things, for both book clubs. She really wanted to read this one because she had ancestry from Cornwall. But it turned out that this starts out in Cornwall, and then these characters move all over the place. So that part was kind of disappointing. But this is still a book that she wanted to read. She recommended, let's read that one. It's set in Cornwall. And so I am counting it for that prompt. I had never read a Daniel Silva book. His main character in this series is an art restorer. And I think it would have been a lot more interesting to me if we hadn't started so far down in the series. I want to say this is maybe book 25 or something in this series. And we kind of all agreed that there were so many characters, and probably a lot of these characters were ones that we would already be familiar with if we had read the earlier books in the series. So this is not a book I would recommend picking up if you have not read this series. But it did have a lot to do with art and forgeries and art auctions and things like that. So if you have an interest in art, this might be a series that you want to look into. So the next person you could meet was a pilot. And so you were to find a book with a mode of transportation on the cover. So this was about the only one in my 25 by 25 box of books that had any kind of transportation on the cover. There's an old car here. This is historical. This is the first in a duology by Francine Rivers, and I really enjoyed this. It has gotten some reviews that were not so great, but I thought this one was excellent. It's a generational story. It starts out with this mother, and then her daughter is kind of the main character of the series, and then she has a daughter, and then it carries on, the generations carry on into the next book. They're both really chunky, and so I ended up listening to both of these, I think on Libby, and I went on, I think I did listen to one other book in between, but then later I went on and listened to the second one, and I did not like it as much. But the first one is Her Mother's Hope, and then the second one is Her Daughter's Dream. Now, I rated this one 5 stars. This one, if I had been reading the physical book, there was one point where I wanted to throw it across the room, but I'm glad I didn't. It would have made a loud bang. But still, definitely a wonderful series. Like I said, it's generational. It's set over quite a few years, and it's a story of family relationships and redemption and faith, and I would recommend it, but just know there are some kind of divisive things that happen, and so you might not like everything about it. So because this one is the longest book in my 25 by 25 collection, and I read it this month, I counted this book for the very first prompt, which was to read the longest book on your TBR. So the next person that you could meet is a treasure hunter, and you were to read a book with foil on the cover. I had another book by Francine Rivers picked out for that. It was called Lady's Mine, and I still have it here. I'm planning to get to it this month, but a book that I had on hold at the library came in, both the physical copy and my audio copy that I had requested on Libby, and there's foil on the cover, and it is probably my most anticipated book of the year. So I did not hesitate to read My Beloved by Jan Karon, and I absolutely loved it. This was my favorite book for the month, probably my favorite book of the year. It was so good. It's just so heartwarming to be back in Mitford. Y'all know that the Mitford series is my favorite series of all time. This is book 15 in the Mitford books, and it was just delightful. I absolutely enjoyed it. The only sad thing about it is that the narrator who has narrated all the books leading up to this, John McDonough, has passed away, so he was not able to narrate this book. The narrator did a fine job. It was fine, but he didn't try to do the voices like I felt he could have, because this was not just told from Father Tim's voice. Each chapter is told from a different voice, and maybe they just decided it was too much to try all these different voices. I don't know, but it was still a delightful book. And my goal someday, it's on my bucket list, is to go back and read every single book in the series in print. I have really only ever listened to them on audio, except for the Mitford Bedside Companion and the other companion books that I've read in print. But I don't think I've read any of the main 15 books in print. I've just listened to them on audio, and they're delightful. But I would like to just sit down and savor them at some point. Anyway, though, I got this from the library. I definitely want to get my own copy. And if you have read the Mitford series, you will not be disappointed by this one. It is wonderful. And then the last person you might meet is a tomb raider. And the prompt there was to steal a book, or steal a book from someone's TBR. So she wanted you to read a book that you heard someone else say that they were going to read. And I knew immediately which one I would pick for that, because I had just heard Storm from Storm Reads in September say that she was going to read The Poacher's Son by Paul Dworin. She did read it in September, but I was planning my TBR, and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to read for this prompt. So The Poacher's Son is the first book in the Mike Bowditch series. Mike Bowditch is a game warden. He has been to the police academy. He is a full-fledged policeman. He's like a policeman for the national parks, basically. It's not like a security guard. He is an actual policeman who's been to police academy and all of that. But his father is accused of killing someone. He grew up with his father, knowing that his father was a poacher, and now he's a game warden. So that's an interesting dynamic. I didn't love it as much as I was hoping I would. I had read book 10 for book club a few years back, and I was interested enough to definitely look into reading more of the series. I may still read some more, but there was a good bit of swearing, and it was a little steamier than I was expecting. There was some kind of open door sex scenes with him and his girlfriend, and I was like, okay, that's not necessary. But anyway, I think I rated it 3 stars, and I may try at least one more, because I don't remember there being anything like that in book 10. Anyway, it wasn't bad, and I like the idea of reading a book about a game warden, and it's also set in Maine, so that's interesting. So yeah, I'm glad that I read it for sure, and I possibly will continue on, but it's not going to be a high priority. Okay, so my booby trap. I picked The Water Pit, which was to read a book with water on the cover, and I read Hope Springs by Kim Cash Tate. This was good. Not my favorite, but it did have a lot of good, interesting family dynamic. This is an African-American author, so some of the cultural references and things are not necessarily the style that I'm used to, or that I'm used to reading about. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it, to kind of see inside the heart of an African-American family. But of course, there were things that I didn't care for about it. but I thought it was really good, and I would definitely read more by this author. This was my first book by her, and I know she is a pretty popular author. So yeah, I'm glad that I read this one. But alas, I picked the wrong escape. So my way of escape was Trapdoor, or read a book with a door on the cover. And I had to end up going with a different book than what I originally planned to. I had originally planned to read a book by Charlene Ann Baumbick, but it was the third book in a trilogy, and I never got around to getting started with the trilogy, and I was not going to skip to the third book just because I was out of time. So I started looking back through my books just to see if I had missed something, and because when I was planning my TBR, that was the only book I remembered seeing that had a door on the cover. But thankfully, there was a book on my currently reading list that I decided at the beginning of the last week of October to tackle, and I ended up finishing that book, and it turned out to be a very close second as far as favorites go for the month, a very close second to the Mitford book, and it's called Mossy Creek, and I loved this. This was so good. Now, this is not a Christian book, but it's a clean book, and it's funny. It is by several different authors: Deborah Smith, Donna Ball, Nancy Knight, Sandra Chastain, Deborah Dixon, and Virginia Ellis. Now, if you saw my video where I went on the book crawl in Lakeland, I bought the first 5 of these, I think, at Book-A-Readerville, which is another store that my employer owns that's in Lakeland, Florida. And they just kind of caught my eye, and I thought, oh, Mossy Creek, that sounds really good. And it was. Y'all, it was so good. This is going to be definitely a new favorite series of mine. I don't know if it will surpass Miss Julia. It definitely will not surpass Mitford, but it is right up there. And I would go so far as to say that if you like authors like Fannie Flagg, if you like quirky Southern characters, small town, that you might want to give this a try. I found this to be delightful. It was funny. The characters were just over the top, and I really, really loved it. So I'm excited that I already own the next 5. I think it's a 9-book series, and I looked and checked. My library has the first 6, so I know I can for sure get the 6th one. That is, if they haven't weeded it out by the time I get there. But hopefully I'll be able to find the rest of the series in my book shopping excursions. And if not, hopefully I can find them online. So anyway, this was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So that is everything I read for the Journey Through the Bible Readathon. Again, check out Katie from Paperbacks and Ponytails. Subscribe to her channel, and be sure that you participate next year if you have not participated already. And also check out other people who participated and see what they read, and you know, give their channel some love. One of my subscribers, Amy of Hearthridge, she posted, I think on Instagram, her printout that she had completed, so be sure and look her up as well. And anyone else who reads Christian fiction, there is a wonderful community of Christian booktubers, and I follow quite a few of them. I don't get a chance to watch as many as I would like to, but there's some wonderful Christian fiction books out there, and some really fun readathons like this one that are happening. So if you enjoy reading Christian fiction, I hope that you will seek out some of these other booktubers who can possibly give you some wonderful recommendations. So that is all I have for this video. I will be back very soon with part 2 of my October wrap up, as well as my stats for the month. I finished a total of 38 books, and I'm excited to tell you about the rest of them. So that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.